It's an amazing Friday morning, and you are welcome once again to our Living in the Digital World program series. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. My name is Estella Hilda Anaman, and I'm the coordinator for American Corner Abuba, and I'll be your moderator for this session. So American Spaces provides access to current and reliable information about the United States through book collections, internet access, events, and activities for everyone. Election misinformation has become a critical issue in the digital age, posing a significant threat to the integrity of democratic processes worldwide. And this highlights the urgent need to understand and combat this problem. So today we are discussing the important topic, which is combating election misinformation. And today we have the privilege of hearing from Jonas Nyabo. He is a journalist and a coordinator for iJournal Africa. So Jonas is a multimedia journalist, fact checker, and a new media trainer. His experience over the past 9 years has been in the area of radio, broadcasting, digital news production, and new media communication. He is a fellow at Dubawa, Ghana, and is a coordinator for iJournal Africa, a new media and digital skills training organization. So before we begin, please take a moment to share this live stream with your network so that we can reach as many people as possible. And during the session, please type all your comments or questions in the comment box below, and they'll be well addressed. Thank you so much for staying with us. Over to you, Jonas.
Hi, thank you so much, Estella, and good morning to all those watching. Today, we are going to talk about election misinformation. But you hear me often refer more to election disinformation rather than misinformation, and I'll explain why in a bit. And we are discussing this because Ghana is barely 5 months away to our general elections on the 7th of December, 2024. And as fact checkers or researchers involved in disinformation and misinformation, we've identified a trend of a spike in misinformation and disinformation around this period, especially related to politics. And so we believe that discussing this comes at a very critical time for us to learn and also share different experiences. This is not peculiar to just Ghana, but I think across the world, anytime there are major or significant events, including political elections, sometimes in situations of epidemics or crisis, usually have a spike in different forms of false information or information disorder. And so for Ghana, which has elections barely 5 months away, this is a critical time for us to discuss this very important subject. And so to reiterate, we are discussing combating election misinformation, or as you may, election disinformation. So first of all, we would look at what misinformation generally is, and then we will narrow it down to election misinformation, and then we will look at how election mis or disinformation has an impact or how it impacts democracy. We would also look at how the nature and the spread of election misinformation or election disinformation. And we would also discuss the various sources of election mis or disinformation. And then we would finally look at how we can identify this phenomenon, and which would be critical for us, especially going into the December election. So first of all, I would share with you this quote from the National Endowment for Democracy in the US, which says that democratic elections rely on a competitive process, a faith or trust in electoral institutions, and the informed participation of citizens. Three keywords I would like to highlight in this quote, which would be the premise for our discussion today, is the fact that democratic elections, which again Ghana has, relies on a competitive process. I would add fair as well, a competitive process where there is a fair ground, there is equal playing field among all the competitors or among all the stakeholders. There is also trust in the electoral institutions. They have to be faith. People must have faith in the electoral institutions. And then finally, there should be informed participation. People participating in these processes, be it especially the voters, must be informed, and their level of information would actually relate to the kind of decision they are going to take pertaining the election as to who they are going to vote for in whether presidential or the parliamentary elections. So first of all, we have to know that the process must be very competitive. It must be fair on fair grounds. No particular stakeholder or no political party must have undue advantage over the other. All the competing parties must be given a level playing field in the elections. If it is access to the voter registration list, all political parties must have it. If it is access to the strong room of the Electoral Commission to be observers, all political parties must have it. If it is allowing polling station executives or agents quite some meters in the inner perimeter of the voting grounds, all political parties must have this access. It shouldn't be limited to just a few. Secondly, the faith and trust in the electoral institutions. People must trust that these institutions are going to deliver on their mandate, and they are going to be fair, they are going to be just in the discharge of their electoral functions. And then also the citizens must be informed. There must not be any deliberate attempt to misinform people. People must take decisions based on the right information so they can participate correctly in the democratic process. So all these are the three ingredients that are necessary for democratic elections. The next thing we are looking at is how we are going to define this. So like I said, I am going to largely refer to election disinformation rather than misinformation, which is our subject. And the reason is because personally, I believe that a lot of what we have seen or a lot of what is done relates more to disinformation, which is the deliberate attempts to influence people negatively, or the deliberate attempt to get people to act based on false information. And if you followed our previous discussion on this series, where we talked about fact checking, we said misinformation was the sharing of false information unintentionally. So you have a false information, or you have shared an information that is false, but then you did it without the intention to cause harm. It wasn't intentional. That is what we call misinformation. But disinformation is a situation where the information is false, but then you intentionally or deliberately shared it to misinform people, or you deliberately shared it to, even though you knew it was false information. So I would define election disinformation as a deliberate attempt to use false information to influence the participation of voters in electoral processes, and also to manipulate election results and undermine the trust in the concerned or the stakeholder institutions. So we can break it down by first identifying that it is a deliberate attempt. Election disinformation is a deliberate attempt. This is where different agents intentionally concoct false information and then put it out there with the intention to influence participation of voters in electoral processes. So we can have an instance where people create false information to discourage a population from going out to vote, or discourage a population from going out to actually register in the voters register, although they have turned 18 and they are eligible to be voters. So recently, I think just a few months back, the Electoral Commission gave the opportunity for people who just turned 18 and people without voters ID card to actually step out to register their name in the voters registration. So with this process, There are people who would easily create a false narrative, create a false information to discourage people from voting. For instance, you have a group of people or a political party with a particular interest targeting people in the stronghold of his or her opponent and sharing information that the machines for registration have broken down. And so the Electoral Commission has decided to postpone the registration in that area to the following week. This information obviously is going to discourage people from going to the centers to register in to participate in the election. So that particular disinformation is going to influence the participation of voters in that particular electoral process. We also have a situation where people can create a false information and say that the Electoral Commission has, or a text message can go around to people, and people are informed that they do not need to go and confirm their name in the voter registration list. This false information is obviously going to affect the participation of voters in electoral processes. The next part, the next term under election disinformation is the manipulation of election results, which we see very commonly. And this will not happen until the day of elections, and especially when Ghana is trying to move into digitize the process of relaying election results from polling stations to the Electoral Commission's headquarters. So how that happens is that people can put out false information to manipulate election results. And in doing that, they know the official figures that have been shared by the Electoral Commission, but they still create their own figures, float these particular figures in the system, get it widely shared. And then when this is widely shared, it becomes very difficult for people to even believe the right result or the accurate result when it comes out. So the Electoral Commission reports that the NDC or the NPP had 50,000 votes in a particular constituency, but then a political opponent would actually go out there and understate the results that the person or the candidate actually got in that constituency. What will happen is that when they do that and they share this information with influencers, and this concocted figure goes viral, it becomes very difficult for people to trust the figures that are shared by the Electoral Commission, which is the sole institution or the sole body given or allowed by law to declare election results. When the false information goes out there, it's very difficult for people to believe even when the right result comes out. Related to that is the third aspect of it, which is undermining the trust in concerned institutions. So there are actually groups, organizations, institutions that actually undertake calculated attempts to undermine the trust in institutions. So in Ghana's elections, for instance, we have key organizations or key institutions, apart from the political parties. We have key institutions like the Electoral Commission, which, like I mentioned, are the sole agencies or the sole institutions responsible for declaring results of elections. And so there could be a deliberate attempt to undermine trust in them, such that their image may be battered to the extent that if they are doing their work and they are doing it well, people may not even believe it, because there's been a deliberate and a calculated attempt to actually undermine trust in these institutions and the work that they do. Another particular or important institution would be the courts, or the Supreme Court in this case. In 2016 and in the 2020, Ghana, for the first and second time, had election results being challenged in court at the Supreme Court. And this puts the Supreme Court at the center of the elections, because adjudicating that matter would mean that they are either going to confirm a candidate as being the rightful winner of an election, or they saying that the person didn't win the election. And so there could be a deliberate attempt to discredit the institution so that people do not believe them, even if they are doing their constitutionally mandated work, even if they are doing it right, even if they are being very fair and balanced. People may not trust them because of a deliberate attempt to mar their reputation, or a deliberate attempt to erode trust in these institutions. And so the three things is influencing participation, whether or not people go out in their numbers to vote. The second one is manipulating the results, which often happens on the election day or right after the voting, to manipulate the results so that when the Electoral Commission comes in to announce the actual result, people may not even believe it. And the third one is undermining trust in concerned institutions, including institutions like the Supreme Court, the Electoral Commission itself, or even the National Commission for Civic Education, which is responsible for going out to increase people's interest in participation in democratic and civic activities. How does this have an impact on democracy? So Ghana, as it is now, is one of the oases of peace and democracy in the sub-region in West Africa. Even across Africa, Ghana is heralded as one of the most peaceful countries, highly respected for practicing democracy since 1992. And so the spread of misinformation could eventually or actually impact or hurt democracy in the country. How this happens is, first of all, sowing of distrust in society, and then also ensuring that society becomes highly polarized. Polarization on the lines, in this case, because we are discussing elections, polarization on the lines of elections. And so even if there is a development issues to be addressed, there is an issue that is related purely to national development, people will be looking at it in the lens of NPP or NDC. That is a result or the impact of misinformation or election disinformation, getting or creating a highly polarized society, making it difficult for people to think whether something is true or false, but they rather think about it in the lens of their own biases, their bias about their support for the NDC or their support for the NPP. And then also sowing distrust in the institutions, which I have earlier mentioned. Another typical incident or impact is inciting violence. So when there is disinformation, some of it is a calculated attempt to incite violence against a political opponent, or also just to create violence so that an interested person can have his or her way in doing some harm to the democratic process. We all know that when there is chaos, when there is confusion, it allows bad actors to undertake any negative activity they want to do. When there is violence, anything can happen. If there are people who want to smuggle things out of the country, if there are people who want to actually steal ballot papers, if there are people who want to steal ballot boxes, people want to create some confusion to undertake certain unacceptable behavior during the elections. All these can typically happen when there is violence. And so disinformation can actually cause violence, especially during and then after the elections. The third impact of election disinformation is fueling mistrust against state institutions. I have elaborated already on this particular point, how fueling mistrust against state institutions that are related to the elections, including the National Commission for Civic Education, including the Judicial Service, or including the Supreme Court and the Electoral Commission. The third one is undermining the civic and democratic processes, processes including voter registration, including voter transfers and things like that. People spreading disinformation around elections can undermine all these civic processes and also discourage people from partaking in these processes. It can also cause people to it can also cause people not to trust the process generally. So people have certain perceptions that their votes do not count. People have perceptions that voting in a particular area, they will be disenfranchised. People have the view that if they do not, if they vote for a particular candidate, they could be fished out and then beaten, or they can be threatened by someone else. All these are elements that help us understand that spreading disinformation can undermine the entire civic and democratic process. So how does this impact on the individual voters' behavior? Um, uh, so people's decision can be influenced, and there's no two ways about that. We know that when there is truthful or accurate information, people are able to make informed choices. So that is the reason why fact checkers or information disorder researchers are concerned about looking into this area, because when people have the right information, they are able to take the right decisions. We know that as important as democracy is, it is important for citizens who some people describe democracy as a system of government for the people, by the people. And so people are at the center of democracy. So if there is a democratic process like an election, the way people perceive it and the kind of information that people have about the process is very, very important. And so disinformation has a negative influence on the decision that people make concerning elections. So election misinformation or disinformation can sway voter decisions by distorting their perception of particular candidates. So you can have a disinformation campaign that is targeted at painting a particular candidate black. So you have a campaign that is targeted at changing the perception of people around about a candidate. For instance, describing a candidate as a very arrogant person, or saying the candidate is very stingy, or saying the candidate is immoral, or saying the candidate is corrupt. All these are campaigns that can be waged against a particular candidate. And if this is public, this has a way of distorting people's perception about the candidate and influencing their choice. So the individual citizen may decide that they are going to vote for the candidate, but because there is a deliberate campaign against that person, and that campaign actually comes out to paint the person black, the person may decide to vote for somebody else and not that particular candidate, who may actually have been the right choice for that particular constituency or the country they are voting in. The other one is creating a false impression about the electoral process, leading to informed voting choices being undermined by false narrative and manipulative content. So because people are fed with the wrong information, their voting choices are undermined by false narrative and then manipulative content. The other part, again, is trust. Don't get tired of hearing this. Like I said in the introductory statement, trust in the institution is very important. And then because without the trust, the democratic process and the structures in itself will stand to be broken. The proliferation of misinformation or disinformation erodes trust in the electoral system and also the political institutions. And then it fuels very great skepticism about the entire process. And then it causes division within electorates, casting doubt about the integrity of the process. Even if the process is free and fair, there are people who may not believe so and may continue to fight it because they believe that the system has been skewed, or they believe that there's been some level of corruption around the election process. And then we also have a polarization effect on citizens. So this already in Ghana, there are people who are divided along various lines. So I mentioned politics. People are also divided among the likes of people are divided along the lines of religion. People are divided along the lines of religious orientation. People are divided along the lines of tribe and where they come from. All these are polarization effects. So spreading misinformation actually exacerbates some of this division. that we already have in society, or even though it's already a bad thing to have this polarization in society. So for instance, if you have a misinformation saying that people from a particular tribe are being favored in the voter registration process, or people within a particular group are being given preferential treatment concerning the elections, all these are ways, all these are disinformations that creates polarization within society. And it also creates echo chambers. So echo chambers are a typical example is if you are on Twitter or if you're on Facebook and you realize that the kind of conversations you always see on your timeline are always praising a particular political party. An echo chamber describes the situation where you are seeing only those things and not things from your opponent. So it's like you have confined yourself in a chamber where all those people are expressing opinions that you believe with. You are not seeing a single opinion that is contrary to the things that you believe in. This is what we call an echo chamber. And then eventually we may have a lot of conflict in society, and then we can have and when we have these, it becomes very difficult to build consensus. So for instance, recently in South Africa, after the election, they have formed a unity government, which obviously could not happen if there wasn't consensus building, if they didn't sit to discuss the outcome and then find out the immediate solution. It's it's a possible thing to happen in a society. And so because of the need for Ghana not to undermine consensus building in the electoral area, it's important to always ensure that disinformation is nipped in the bud so that it doesn't cause division and polarization in society. Let's look at the nature and spread of election disinformation. So first of all, the nature, I'll talk about the fact that we are seeing an increase in the rise in false news reports. And unfortunately, very unfortunately, you see this largely even within the traditional space, which most people previously trusted to be the source of positive news. False news reports, including mentions on radio, news reports on TV, and you read stories online, articles online that has a wrong headline, wrong image, wrong context. All these things are crimes. All these things are false, or all these things are fit into disinformation around elections and could lead to the negative impact that we've discussed in the previous slide. We also have the use of misleading or false statistics. Misleading or false statistics. So this is a situation where people use statistics and false data to spread disinformation. So people say that data does not lie. But again, we have situations where people can actually use data and use the data out of context. They quote it out of context to make a particular point that they want to make. This misleading or false statistics is one of the forms in which election disinformation comes. We have a situation of conspiracy theories, which is also quite common, where non-existent situations are taken and then are actually used as disinformation and then shared within communities of people who would easily believe or who would easily like to, because it's perhaps placed into their own personal biases. The third one is AI-generated content, which is gradually growing in Ghana, where AI is used to generate images, text, or stories that are related to an issue. So if there is if there is an accident or there is an issue, and then there is somebody wants to create a false impression or exaggerate the situation, AI can be used to exaggerate the situation. If a political rally was organized and just a handful of about 30 people came, AI can be used to create the impression that over 2,000 people came to that particular rally. So these are some of the forms in which misinformation could come, and it has to be looked at carefully. And as researchers, we are seeing an increase in political or election disinformation on social media. And we can't say that this is going to stop, because there are a growing list of fact checkers or growing list of influencers, but it is going to increase because we've noticed that it has increasingly become a tool or an arm by political figures. People are now falling on media houses to publish false news reports to increase their support base of their election political parties. So this is not going to cease immediately, but it is expected to increase at least until after the elections, where things are a little when within the election, things are quite tensed. After the elections, things will start simmering down a little. But then around this time, we will still see a spike in election-related disinformation within Ghana and across different platforms, including the traditional media. So false news reports include situations where you have fabricated or misleading reports that are presented as factual news. So you have traditional or known news organizations that are known for the truth, publishing false news reports. All these can be fabricated, these can be misleading, but these are published as false news. And then eventually, because it is published in public, this can misinform or lead people astray. So these are some of the things that we have to look at. And so around this period, we have to be very critical or careful, even if the story is shared by a traditional media house that you already know, that you trust. You have to be careful and look at it again, just to make sure you are not being fed with a fabricated or misleading report. The other one is the misleading statistics. That is using selective data or manipulation of data to represent a situation. I've given an example already, but using statistics is also gaining grounds, because previously we preached the fact that data can't lie. And so bad information actors are finding a way to use misleading statistics to paint a certain picture, which is important to note. And then we have conspiracy theories where the stories or the statements are blatantly baseless, or they are unfounded allegations, and they are shared in the media. So you could have a situation where you are told a story of some alleged secret plots or schemes that are related to the election, or they tell you somebody is thumbprinting some ballot papers in a certain hotel somewhere. These could be conspiracy theories, or people form theories to say people of a particular area, anytime they decide that they are going to yes, the thumbprinting of ballot papers. These are schemes that would often come up during elections, or you hear stories about some biometric registration devices found in somebody's room. Some of these can come out as conspiracy theories. And then we also have the last one, which is the AI-generated content, which is a pure fabrication of a non-existent information. So what are the sources of election-related disinformation? These could include foreign actors. I said in the introduction that Ghana is known as an oasis for democracy, known for its peace, democracy since 1992. Ghana has had a very stable democracy. Unfortunately, within our West African sub-region and across Africa, there's been several incidents of crime that has been committed against different people. We've had incidents of, we've had fears or concerns about extremism coming down the Sahara through Ghana. Ghana has been spared of different attacks, although there's been attacks in Togo, Abidjan, there's been attacks in Burkina Faso. Ghana has been spared. And so for most people, people who actually thrive or benefit from war or benefit from chaos, who are foreign actors, they may, as a result of the influence of geopolitics, interfere from wherever they are within Ghana's election. So this can be a source of election disinformation because they are going to use disinformation to create confusion within the elections. The second one is local groups and agencies, including political parties. I'm sure this one is all too familiar or too recognized by a lot of us, that political parties, because of the quest for power, because of the quest to win elections, they would employ all forms of tactics to win the elections, including a smear campaign against their opponents, including exaggerating their performance in government, including exaggerating their importance, you know. So these are the second source, which is quite well known. The third one would be in misinformation campaigns through coordinated activities. So these people may not necessarily be political parties, but people who have an interest in the elections and they are within the country. So it could include a group of influencers who want to exert their dominance or show political parties that they are important and they are influential. So you can have people trying to game, quote unquote, game the hashtag so that they're able to have one hashtag ranking very high among the others. And they believe that having this will get them noticed and then make them, get them some jobs to help political parties in terms of their social media communication. And so that is it for the third one, misinformation campaigns through coordinated activities. And then we have incidents where state actors and election stakeholders themselves get engaged in election disinformation. So I've mentioned some of the key state actors: the Electoral Commission, the Supreme Court, the National Commission for Civic Education, and all other state actors. They may come out, including election stakeholders or the Electoral Commission. While I said that some political parties may be interested in causing disaffection or causing the Electoral Commission to lose trust in the eyes of citizens, the commission itself and all these other stakeholders could be the source of election misinformation. Sometimes this happens largely because they do not access accurate information. They are maybe relying on third parties for their information. So that could be a source of election disinformation. So we'll look at some examples. So one of the common things that happened recently is these two pictures that are put side by side, which is the first one on my left has a picture with the NPP's current running mate to the flag bearer, Dr. Mahmoud Baumia, holding an umbrella, and the left also has him holding an umbrella. But the first one, if you see the red area that have been circled in the picture, the umbrella has the logo of his rival political party, the National Democratic Congress, the logo in the umbrella he's holding. And the color of the umbrella is the color of the NDC. And then the picture on my right has him holding the umbrella with the colors of the NPP on it, without the logo of the NDC. This clearly, if you see these two pictures floating in the system, this clearly shows you that one of them has been manipulated. And so causing an investigation into this matter, the fact checkers found that the picture on the left has rather been manipulated. The original picture is the one on the right, which is Matthew Opoku Prempeh, who is the running mate to NPP's Dr. Baumia, holding the umbrella of the NPP with the red, white, and blue colors. And the one on the left has the negative or has the false information because it claims to portray the fact that the running mate is using the flag, the umbrella of the opposition party. So we've had the post that went with this particular information claim that, try to say that even the running mate was a supporter of the opposition party because he is finding solace under their umbrella. So these are some of the common incidents we may encounter as the election goes on. We also have a situation where you have news cards like this, postcards like this, that because bad actors have noticed that a lot of media houses are using they are using these news cards, which is just a picture. They have the story headline and a paragraph from the story, and then they share it on WhatsApp. Because bad information actors are seeing that this is increasingly becoming very common, they are putting in false information, putting the picture of whoever is associated with it, and then spreading it, even though the text may be taken out of context or the text may be a pure fabrication. So these are important things. This is another thing that we must also look at. So in the first example, on my left, you see a picture of the NDC flag bearer, who is John Mahama, where he said that Ghanaians are naturally dirty. The sanitation ministry is needless, and there's basically nothing I can do to improve it. Best thing is to collapse that ministry. So that is what they claim John Mahama said. As to whether it's true, we'll find out in the example in the next slide. Next to this, on my right, is a picture of the Asantehene 24622. And then we also have Joyce Bar Mokhtari, who is a spokesperson for John Mahama's campaign, where they claim she says Asantehene is a king, is not a king, but a chief. And they attribute it to Joyce Mokhtari, who is a spokesperson and aide of John Mahama's campaign. So I'll open this story. The first one, this is also another example, by the way. So the first one is claimed that a memo coming from the NDC has exposed the independent candidates in a Jiso constituency. The claim was that the independent candidate, who was an active member of the NPP, the independent candidate was actually seeking funds or seeking support from the NDC. So the claim was that a Facebook user, Elikem Sewodo, published what he claims to be a memo from the opposition NDC. The post details what he says was a plan to mobilize logistics for the independent candidates in the Jiso by-election. So this election happened a few months ago. It happened in the month of around April or May. So the user published these images, which he claims is a memo from the NDC giving support to the independent candidate in the Jiso constituency, who was in the the independent candidate was in the two-horse race with the NPP candidate. Now, the independent candidate was once a former member of the NPP. So that's what makes it very interesting. And so opposition elements will try to say that even though he is independent, he is being influenced by the NDC. Now, the verification of this was done in different ways, including trying to juxtapose how was this letter really coming from the NDC? The letter showing the kind of support it is allegedly given to the independent candidate. And this includes, for instance, checking the address of the NDC. When the NDC sends a letter or a formal release, does this address show on those letters? And then the second part is looking at the signature. Is that how these letters are signed? Now, the Dubois research found that the NDC's letterhead, it doesn't usually feature this address that was showed in the letter, in the previous letter, the one that has gone viral, which has been circulated which has the circle, the yellow circle around it. When you go to an original letter like this one, you don't see that. And so the original letters from the NDC does not really or usually have this mark on them. Again, if you go to the signature part of it, you realize that previous letters from the NDC, which are signed by the General Secretary, do not have honorable attached to his name. His name is Fifi Fiavi Kwete. He signs his letters without the use of the addition of honorable attached to his name. But the fake one that was circulated, as you can see, had honorable attached to his name. So that's also something that is worth noting. He adds General Secretary, National Democratic Congress. The fake letter did not have the National Democratic Congress stated under a letter. So this is one of the ways that we used to find out if a letter supposedly coming from a political party is true or false. Now, the second example, in the second example, which I read previously, the story claims that John Mahama said that Ghanaians are naturally dirty. Is this really the case? So this could be one of the simple fact checks that can be done, because a public speech has allegedly been made, and then the claim says that somebody had said A. Now, for us to verify if the person indeed said A or he said something else, we have to go back for that particular tape and then listen again. So the verification of Dubois found that the quote, which Mahama said is, "We will close down the Ministry of Sanitation. One, to reduce expenditure, and two, I don't see any use. The country is dirtier than when there was no Ministry of Sanitation." So this particular phrase, "the country is dirtier than when there was no sanitation ministry," was taken out of context and then was allegedly by political opponents. Political opponents claim that John Mahama said that Ghanaians are naturally dirty. So as you can see, saying someone is naturally dirty is very different from saying the country is dirtier than when there was no Ministry of Sanitation. So these are some of the things that we would often see around this election period. Knowing this difference tells us that this could be a campaign that is being used to smear the NDC presidential candidate. So these are things that we have to note. Now, after looking at these examples, let's look at how this spreads or where this spreads. So we often have social media being an amplifier. So social media already, there are millions of people already on these platforms. There is no censor. They post whatever they feel like. And then we have a situation where political parties are hiring influencers or people who are like available to do what people call quote unquote dirty job for them on social media, whether insulting political opponents, casting smears on their reputation. People are doing all this on social media. And then we also have, in this case, cases where traditional media, radio, television are also putting out false information. This gets on social media and it is amplified. People cut short clips from radio or TV and post it on social media, and this is amplified to a wider community. It goes through this, and then it gets access to wide people. And when people read this, people fall for it, whether it's true information or false information. We also have the dark web. Apart from Facebook or Twitter, where you have this potential disinformation spreading, we also have the dark web, like Telegram channels. So some Telegram channels, a lot of it are closed groups, and so you may not have access to it to know what exactly is going on in these communities. That is where political parties or actors gather they can discuss certain negative campaigns they want to undertake. They discuss who they are going to attack. And one of the ways, or as researchers, one of the things you can use to identify is if you see that a group of people are posting this post with the same caption about their political opponent. That tells you that there's been a coordinated discussion, usually which is done in the dark web, including closed groups on social media, Telegram groups, WhatsApp groups that are close to the public. And then I mentioned traditional media as well, which unfortunately could be one of the areas or places where disinformation is shared. And then local communities, these ones sometimes is difficult to catch, but I'm sure all of us, there are discussions or there are some rumors or certain things that we hear in communities that people say about political parties or candidates within the local communities. These are not things that you find on social media, but within the local communities, these are information that goes around that people do discuss. How do you identify this? We believe that identifying election disinformation is key to combating it. If you don't know that this particular thing is a disinformation, this particular thing related to the election is false information, it will be difficult to combat it. That is why our previous discussion, we talked about being careful of our biases. If you are biased in terms of political party, you are biased in terms of your religion, if you are biased in terms of sexual orientation or any other identifier, that sort of creates barriers or division among society, it may be difficult for you to spot disinformation that seem to align with your views. And so identifying it is key. So we use our AI algorithms, fact-checking organizations, and then also through media monitoring platforms. Election disinformation can proactively be detected, and we will take actions to curb them if we are able to detect them. Now, debunking these include using fact-checking resources, including certain tools, building databases. Now, for fact-checking organizations, we have databases that sometimes profile people who are known for sharing disinformation, so that anytime you see that something is coming from these particular people, you know that the potential of that particular information being false is very high. And so some of these people are already in databases that are listed red, and so they are constantly being monitored for information that is shared online. And also knowing the right sources to check. So online platforms dedicated to debunking myths like Tubawa and Ghana Fact, checking rumors and false information that circulate around the election period is important to provide evidence-based refutations, clarifications to counter misinformation effectively and to promote informed decision-making. So around the election, fact-checking organizations in Ghana will come together to form a coalition and partner with organizations like ODEO, which is the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers, to monitor the ground, to know exactly what is happening, to debunk false information, and also bring clarity to whatever election-related information that is happening. And then we also have education campaigns that is creating awareness to educate the public. The public is very important in addressing election-related disinformation because obviously, like I said, if you have an informed society, if you have people who are literate, we are able to combat this. So we have educational programs, media literacy programs, and also empowering citizen journalists so that they can put out the right or appropriate information to combat disinformation, no matter the form or the nature in which they come. So the media literacy involves structured programs to enhance individuals' ability to critically analyze it. And an example is what we are doing today. This exposition will help us understand how to identify election disinformation and also how to curb it. And also organizations are empowering citizen journalists who are in communities, because certain misinformation, like I said, you can't catch it on social media or in the traditional media, but you find it in the local communities. That is where citizen journalists who are empowered, who are educated, who know how to fact check can come out to help address this particular information in our society. Thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll have another session again to delve deeper into some more examples and then some more tools that will come in handy for us as individuals, as a society, to fact check election-related disinformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jonas. This has been really, really insightful, pointing out so many tools and strategies in combating disinformation and misinformation during elections. We have a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to start with a question from Delight. He's asking that, please, is election misinformation a criminal offense under the law? And if so, what specific laws or regulations address it?
So there is not a specific law against election disinformation, but generally there is a law around sharing what's quote and unquote fake news in Ghana. And then there is also a law about causing fear and panic. This is not specifically related to elections, but we know some of these disinformation are aimed at causing fear and panic. That could be used against people who spread disinformation. That is why it's very important that you are sure of the information you are putting out before you share it. So specifically, not about election disinformation, but these are general laws around disinformation or things that could cause fear and baseless things that can cause fear and panic around elections that exist in Ghana.
All right, thank you for that response. Also, moving on to Prince. Prince is asking that how can we identify reliable sources of election information amidst the noise of misinformation?
So unfortunately, I wish I could mention particular media houses but these days you cannot really trust 100%. And so you also have to get your microscopes and telescope yourself so that you can fact check information, anything you find online. You don't take everything hook, line, and sinker. That's why we are having this conversation, so that we can all be empowered, that anytime we see something from any media house that seemed to be too good to be true, that seemed to be very something gets you moving, it gets you very emotional, gets you very agitated, gets you so excited. Those extreme kind of information, breaking news, these things that gets you to easily react. These are things that you really have to double check and sometimes even triple check before you go around it. So I can't point specific media houses, but we should all be on guard, have some of the tools that we've discussed previously and we'll discuss in future, so that we can take this in our own hands.
Right. Thank you so much for that. So to add to what Jonas said, we've had previous sessions that has touched on, critical tools that can be used to fact check information or to recognize media biases. So you can go through our live stream videos, and then you can find them so that you can be armed enough to recognize this information especially during election time. So moving on to the next question, the last question. This is from Delight again. He's asking that what's the most common tactics used to spread election misinformation, and how can we be vigilant?
So I'll just mention a few. So the example I give out about a postcard. So you see a postcard with a picture of somebody and then the headline. A lot of media houses are doing that these days, which is normal. So because bad information actors have realized this is something that media houses are doing, sometimes they create their own false headlines and put a picture there and put the logo of the media houses there as if it is coming from the media house. So for instance, you see a postcard and says maybe Matthew Opoku Prempeh has resigned as running mate to Baumia, and then they put the logo of City Newsroom there or put the logo of My Joy Online there and share it on WhatsApp. This will go viral and people will think this is actually coming from the media house, but it is not. It was created by bad information actors. So these are some of the things that we are seeing. And even people are even cloning or doing that to fact-checking organizations, which even makes the situation even more difficult or precarious. So this is one of the trends. The other one is using your favorite influencers. So you see your influencers post something, and then sometimes they come under the guise of saying, oh, I don't know, I'm just posting it. If it is true, let me know in the comment section. All these things, that's also another strategy that is being used. Also, people are also using hashtags. So they can essentially develop a hashtag and say, a hashtag to smear a particular candidate's image and then make it look like it is true or it is real. So these are some of the trends that so far seem to be growing in Ghana, and I'm sure there will be more when it gets a little much closer to the elections.
Right. Thank you so much. Apparently we have just some few minutes to go. Thank you, Jonas, for once again, as always, for the insightful presentation that you touched on. We also want to thank our participants for engaging in the comment section. You have made it very lively. We thank you so much for joining as well. And we encourage you all to apply the knowledge and strategies that you have gained so that you can verify information before you click, before you share, verify before you end up being a person promoting misinformation or disinformation. So this program is proudly brought to you by the U.S. Embassy Ghana, American Corner Boba, in partnership with Mobile Web Ghana. And that concludes our program. Please do well to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that anytime we go live, you can be notified. So thank you so much and have a happy weekend ahead. Bye.